data logger software that some of y'all may not know about. I got a call last weekend from a fella who had sat through a class, a 2-day class with another individual, and didn't really understand how the data logger worked. I originally was planning on doing this just for him, but I figured there might be some other people out there that didn't really know some of the tips and tricks on using the data logger and applying it towards your global folder. So I want to start off with something that I do for anybody I tune for or my own stuff. And it's on your actual computer. It's actually got nothing to do with Holley. But to me, this is really important. In your software, or I'm sorry, on your computer, you'll see you have a folder for Holley. And I've got V4 and V5 on here. But if you go into V5, this is where you'll access your data logs at the later date after you've downloaded them. I'm going to show you how to download them here in a minute. But anyway, what I do is I create 2 folders, one for data logs, one for system logs. And in data logs, I make a new folder for every race that you go to, okay? So if you're testing, I made this one just for, kind of to show you, you name it whatever you want. Just something so it's easier for you to go back and reference. And one of the big things that when you start getting into, competitive racing, you remember tidbits about a day or about a race, and you kind of know, maybe it was hot or it went down, or man, this track is really resembling, 3 weeks ago when we were at, the 710 race, or when we were at this track or that track or whatever. And if you're like me, you've got like 2,000 different global folders from all different people. So I just throw them into this file. But anyway, this is something that I do for data logs, and it's also something that I do for global folders. So this all matches my, all this stuff lines up with the data logs that I have too. So I can name each individual run, round 1, round 2, test 1, test 2. So now I can go back and reference, this is the global folder, and then this is the data log that matches it, okay? So this is pretty important if you actually want to stay on top of your racing program. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the software here, and now we've got our global folder up, and I just grabbed one of my own personal ones, so I don't like to show anybody else's info to anybody. So this is my own personal stuff, but the one question that he had, the fellow that called me last weekend, was about his fuel map, right? So here's your base fuel map, and he didn't really understand where to tune out a problem that he had. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to data log, and we're going to open a data log. So it's going to populate that screen that we were just in. Here's data logs. I'm going to grab the one that matches this right here. Round 2. See up here it says Darlington no time round 2. Darlington no time round 2. I'm going to open this up. So here we go. This is the data log from it. So he knew how to download his data logs, and he knew how to look at them and whatnot, but he just didn't really know, 1, what he was looking at, and 2, how to really utilize it. So a couple quick things. If you left click, hold, and drag, let go, you zoom in to whatever you've highlighted. I know it seems, to some of you guys, you're probably watching this and going, yeah, I know all this stuff. This may not be for you, but I like to try to help out some of the newer guys who don't know anything about this type of stuff. So you can zoom in on your data logs, and you can actually, kind of see. If you zoom out, that's kind of hard to tell what's happening where. So I always like to do, after every run, I zoom in on usually 3 different parts of the run. The first part of the run, this is a turbo car. I like to zoom in on trans brake and getting on the limiter. So, I start my data logs off at 25% TPS. So if we scroll all the way back here, we'll see it started right at 25% TPS. And it was in vacuum. We had X amount of dome pressure. Then we click on out here, we see we're up on boost, and we reached peak boost here, and we can tell how long we have to sit on the chip and wait for the light to drop. So that's kind of difficult to see when you're zoomed way out. You can tell here because it's a pretty straight contrast, but it's a little easier if you actually zoom in. And then the second part that I like to zoom in on is right when you let go of the brake and to the gear change. And you guys are probably looking at my log and going, man, there ain't no gear change there. Well, there is, but I have a magic converter, and we won't get into that, but there is a gear change there. So, we could zoom in. Now, here we are, we're all in low gear. This is just our RPM trace. Something I want to point out that a lot of people are not aware of. There is quite a few logs out there and cars out there where a log will have a perfectly straight line, okay? And or here, what that is it's missing data. That 99% of the time is coming from electrical noise. So if you feel as if you may have some type of a glitch, or you're blaming it on Holley software, or it's not a problem with the software, it's not a problem with the data logger, 9 chances out of 10 it's your wiring. So the quick way to find this out is if you right click on your data log and you click mark data points. Now if you notice, we just got really bold, but we're going to zoom in and I'm going to show you it's actually little dots. So this is where the ECU is picking up data. Now, I don't have any data logs. I could look at somebody else's data logs and show you where it's missing, but everything that I've wired, I don't have these problems. I don't use resistor plugs. I know a lot of people, they claim you have to have a resistor plug. That's not the case. Good grounding is usually your saving grace for this. Clean wiring installation is usually that's the solution to this. Resistor plug is just kind of a band-aid to a shortcut job or whatever it may be. So that mark data points is it's pretty important. It's if you've got one of those data logs where you're like, well, why is there a straight line here? Just go ahead and entertain yourself and mark data points. Something else you'll notice is down here. This right here, see how it says -5? Almost everybody isn't really aware of this, but you can set a 0 time in your log. So to set a 0 time in your log, it's pretty simple. Right here, automatically set 0 time. This one's already done. This is when trans brake is less than 1. What that'll do is it'll set the 0 time of the log at the release of the trans brake. So if we're reviewing data here and we thought that there was a problem right there, we know that we're only 0.25 into the run. So what you can, if you want to see exactly what this thing left on, you can tab over. There you are. We're at 0.00. Right at the release of the trans brake. On this run we left at 14.3 pounds of boost. I've got a little additional data that some of you guys probably don't have, but G meter, front shock, all that kind of stuff. I don't want to get into how to apply all this type of stuff into going faster, because that opens up a can of worms that honestly I'm just not at capacity to handle everybody's questions. I already get hit with enough of them. But seeing that we have a 0 time, if we know that this car went, say 105 60 foot, we can tab on over here, and here's 104.9. So right here before the 60 foot, if we want to know how much boost was in the engine, or if we had a lull in it, we can tell, we can actually zoom in even further if we want. Now here's the 60 foot. Maybe we had an issue with, maybe it didn't follow our curve fast enough. There's our dome pressure. There's a whole bunch of stuff here that you can learn from. But his biggest issue was he didn't understand how to find a problem in his global folder. Okay, so leave this up. We're going to go over here into our global folder, and you guys probably have noticed that you got this little yellow circle here. What that yellow circle does is it indicates wherever you have clicked, wherever this line right here is on your data log, okay? So that yellow circle is showing you where that arrow is. That's a really helpful tool. He wasn't aware of that, but he also wasn't aware of this. If you go to data log and hit activate overlay, now you've got an overlay of whatever is on your screen for the data log, okay? So the weather's getting great out there right now, and people are making more boosts than they were planning on the trans brake. They're, flashing through the converter a lot harder than they ever have before. So now it's kind of reverse mentality of what it was all summer when it comes to tuning these cars. So now what we have here is this is the entire thing that's on the screen for the data log, okay? Like here's an area for decel fuel. If you had, problems where maybe it was popping and backfiring through the exhaust on the way down, maybe you want to work on this area. Maybe you caught some parachutes on fire or something. This is where you would lean this out, or you would just enable your decel fuel cut. But let's say that his issue was right around the gear change. So let's zoom all the way into just right around the gear change, and we're just going to look at just RPM, and that looks like nothing. It doesn't really make much sense. But it got rid of all of these green lines here, so now we can pinpoint right where we were, right? So if we needed more fuel or less fuel. The other thing is this doesn't just transpire over into the fuel table. Here's our spark table, same thing. So when you start looking at this, you can kind of pinpoint an issue. If you are of the type to actually read spark plugs the way you should, this here is where your plug is pretty much telling you the story. It doesn't really so much tell you anything about this here. It's really just right before you shut it down. So this is where your timing mark is really coming from, where it's been hanging out the longest or at the end of the run. So, you can look at that. You can also look at your boost ICF, or if it's a nitrous car, your nitrous ICF. But here's boost versus time. Now we know, hey, this is where we were in the run. Okay, we're at 1.6-ish into the run. If we go back over here, here's the beginning. Move our yellow dot. So when you're trying to diagnose a problem, there's a lot to learn in the data log. You can learn a lot from these things if you know how to read them. The other thing is that we can, this is a comparison. It's going to bring us back into our data log screen, and we're going to find the same event. Some of these are in V4. I just converted some of these over to V5. So we were looking at round 2. Let's look at round 1 right here, open. And look at that, it brings up a second data log. So if we zoom in, you'll see that this is a choppy line here, okay? And that choppy line is your indicator of the second log that you've opened, all right? So if you look over here, we'll pick right there. If you look over here, this is 1.82 into the run on both of them, okay? If we look at, let's look at boost numbers, right? So 38.3 to 38.4. So the bottom value here is the same, is the second log that we opened. Okay, so the top value is the one that's been opened, which is no time round 2. And then the bottom one is round 1 that we're using as comparison. So you can learn a good bit from this one. So here, if we look out further into the run, maybe we had an issue or it slowed down. If you notice, there's a 500 RPM difference here. So this one wanted more power to come through the converter harder, and this one had enough power in it. So that's your comparison tool. If you open up your comparison tool and you look at your actual, what it does is it still uses the first log. It doesn't use the comparison log. It only uses the first log. So that's important to remember. That's why I like to name all of these global folders to match whatever round you were in, and then you want to do the same thing with your data logs. So we can close the comparison data log, and now we're back to the original. So there's ways to add notes and whatnot into it. And then the last thing I'm going to show you is the edit function, which it really surprised me to hear how many people didn't know that you can actually edit what you're looking at. This car's a Dominator, and it's got a ton of stuff, but if we hit this edit, this is everything the ECU sees. There's a ton of stuff here. So now if it's in dark gray, that means that it is not something that the ECU is looking at, okay? So this didn't have 202 sensors, so it doesn't have AFR right or AFR average. I didn't have any timing retards enabled, so this doesn't show you any of the timing retards. So if you enable something, it will show up here. So if it's in gray, you're not going to be able to see it because it's not there to be seen, because you never had it enabled. So some of this stuff that's got green check marks, N2O stage 1, that's because it's over here into one of these folders. But what we're going to do is we'll get rid of AFR right in Drag Race 2. I just kind of make these so that it's, quick reference to whatever you're used to looking at. And you can click, hold, and drag and drop wherever you want. So if you drag race the car and what you're used to seeing is RPM, TPS, oil pressure, that kind of stuff, you can put all that in 1, and then you could put this in 2. So there's 8 of them. You can change this to whatever you want. Like you can name this whatever you want. Hit OK. It's going to ask you if you wanted to save the changes. Yes. Now, if you want to tab between all the different values that you're allowed to view, just hit the over arrow. It's actually, and as we remove stuff, it gets a little bit easier to read. So, keep clicking off all the stuff that we don't want to see, and it starts to become a lot easier to visualize. Now, I lied. I said that was the last thing I was going to show you. I'm actually going to show you this too. So if you enable, let's say boost, right, and dome pressure. So this is one that a lot of people don't really ever grasp. So dome pressure is exactly that. It's how much pressure you're putting on top of the dome, all right? Boost pressure is how much the engine's seeing. This right here is a scaling setup, okay? So right now this is boost is 0 to 50, and you notice it overlays pretty close, where dome pressure is 0 to 65. If we put dome pressure at 0 to 50, so it matches, notice it's way up there. So it's kind of hard to diagnose if it followed the curve or if it didn't. So this is something that this is all engine specific or setup specific to make sure that this follows this. So you scale this stuff how you see fit. If you click on the actual word dome pressure, it's going to populate this. You can hit auto scale, and that's the way almost everything is set up you open it up for the first time. If you hit auto scale, what it does is it tries to give you the most resolution, which is good, but if you're trying to compare something, it doesn't help you much. So, click it again, turn off auto scale, set a minimum and maximum. If like a back pressure sensor or something like that, you may want to enable some smoothing. Right now there's no smoothing in any of this stuff, but I'll show you what smoothing does. Let's put we'll go drastic, 11-point smoothing. And now, if we look at that line is really smooth. Well, that looks good for pictures, but that doesn't really help us to learn anything. So let's back this down to 3 points average. Right now you see we've got a little bit of, it's a little choppier, okay? And if we want to view raw data, we'll click on dome pressure again, and we'll just hit none. So the when you're looking at this, this is a pretty close. I mean, we're staying close. It's 51, 52, 51, 52. But it's good to be able to see it. If you had an 11-point average, if we had one where it dipped down to 45 or something, we may have an issue. So don't mind this little guy down here. That was when the car get out of the gas and it bleeds off all the pressure, and then it comes back in. So this is like whatever, this was like a high 420 pass or something like that. This is a great tool, and a lot of people don't know anything about it. So I just kind of wanted to show y'all, how to use it and how to use it for your benefit. Hopefully it helped y'all, and if you got any questions, let me know.